Okay, for the second lecture regarding PERT, let's first discuss float and dummy activities. These would have a link with the past papers that we are going to solve further. So let's start with float, also called slack. It is the time an activity can be delayed from its early start time without delaying the project finish time. Means if you could see over here that from node 1 to 2 D is taking 10 days, and from node 1 to 3 E is taking 5 days, and then from node 3 to 2 F is taking 2. So if you could see that from 1 to 2 D is taking 10 days, whereas E and F altogether are taking 7 days. So it means that either E can be delayed by 3 days, because from activity 1 to 2 you have got mostly 10 days, and obviously it is now obvious over here that D and G are on critical path, whereas E and F are not. So E and F can be delayed by, either of them can be delayed by at max 3 days. So if we delay 5 by 3 days, it can still be done without affecting these two activities on D and G, which are on critical path. So float cannot be found on critical path, as that is the minimum needed time to complete the task. So let me revise this once again, that uh, if an activity is going from one node to another node, like D in here, for more days, and other two activities which are not on that path as the critical path activity, they can be delayed. Their delay cannot affect the overall time of the project. This is called float. You might have questions asking that if an activity which is obviously not on the CP, if it can be delayed, and if it can be delayed, then how much you would have to calculate. Further, next is dummy activity. Dummy activities, sometimes we do have a situation where two of the nodes become the predecessor for another node, but these two nodes which are the predecessor for another node do not get combined. So we have to first combine them in one node, so that we could start a new activity from that node onwards. So we use this dummy activity instead. So means dummy activity is an activity which is no activity, has no associated time. It is just there to complete the logical flow of the PERT. Let's see how. For example, for this chart, which is an example chart for us to observe dummy activity working over a PERT, A, B, and C activities do not have a predecessor. It means that they will start from the first activity. A will start from 1 to 2, then B will also start from 1 to 3. As I told you that every subsequent node would have a serial number which is furthering from the previous one, and then we have got C, which is also starting from node 1. So this says that all these A, B, and C are starting from the first node, as they don't have any predecessor. Then we have got D. Over here we can see that D is having predecessors, which are A and B. So once A and B are finished, then D can start. Over here you can see that A and B are both finished, but they are apart from each other. So if I want to start D, I can start from node 2, but the thing is that B is not yet connect. In order to make this logical progression okay with this PERT chart, I would have to put this arrow, dashed arrow, from B to A, which is telling that this is a dummy activity, means that after B, the activity D will be started along, after A and B, activity D can be started. So this is actually the logical progression from node 3 to to make this D happen afterwards. Similarly, now we have got E. E is starting after B and C. So either I would be putting an activity from B to C and I'll be starting E from here, or I'll be putting an activity, a dummy activity from 4 to 3 and starting uh, E from B. Both things are possible. So this is a dummy activity. E is started. Since E is the last node of the PERT, it will be ending in the last, sorry, E will be the last activity of the PERT. It will be starting in the end node of the PERT, and B and C should be related. So I related, instead of C goes to B, B comes down to C, both are possible. If in case that C dummy activity connects C with B, then I'll be starting E from node 3, but over here I'll rather be connecting node 3 with 4, and E will be starting from node 4 and must be ending because it is the last node. We discussed it earlier in previous lecture, that the last activity should end in the node which is the ending node of the PERT chart. So these two are the dummy activities. Now, a dummy activity is having no time associated to it, as it is actually no actual activity. It is used to define a logical relationship which does not exist in the original plan. It denotes node as it is along another, actually it connects nodes as it connects node as it is along another node is the predecessor for the next activity. As I said that both A and B are the predecessor for D, but they are not actually finishing together at one node. Um, Out of the rules of the PERT table drawing, it is necessary that if two activities are originating from one node, they cannot both together end on the same node. So we have to make them separate, and they should be ending in different nodes. Now, it may also use to avoid dingling nodes. What does it mean, dingling nodes? If there is a node which is actually there before the finish of a PERT chart, and it is not further going anywhere. For example, if we don't put this dummy over here or this dummy over here, this 3 would become dingling nodes. So dingling nodes are not allowed. I means nodes which are not ending at the end of the PERT chart, rather they are ending somewhere in the middle without being connected to any other node. So this way PERT would not be proceeding after the task which is finishing at this node. So such nodes are not allowed. So dummy nodes are used to avoid dingling nodes. Even if it is not there for the reason of being the predecessor starting a new activity, we can use dummies to avoid dingling nodes. Now let's proceed to past paper questions. Past paper questions now. This question is W19 QP41. I'll try to cover all the questions in latest to oldest order. So this is the latest one, W19 QP41 question 1. In this questions we are given a table for the activities, and we are asked in part 1 A1, add the correct activities and time to the following program evaluation review technique chart for the software development. Now it is given that activity A does not have any predecessor. So activity A starts from node 1 to 2, and then we have got activity B, which is having A as the predecessor. So B starts after A, and B is of 3 weeks, and then we have got activity C and D. They both have the same predecessor, that is B, and D and C are on the um, next nodes. So C is starting afterwards B, so it is after B and then D is also. Now, as I told you earlier that two nodes which are starting originating from the same um, nodes, two activities which are originating from the same node cannot end on the same node. So both C and D are ending on different nodes. And then we have got E. E is having C and D as their predecessor. So we have to actually have this dummy activity here, um, so that we could link D and C together at node 5 so that we could start activity E. So let me revise once again. Dummy activity, it is added to a project schedule as a placeholder. It has no activity time associated with it. A dummy activity is intended to show a path of action in a project activity diagram and is employed when a logical relationship between the two activities cannot be linked by showing the use of arrow linking one activity to another. So it is an activity um, which is not actual activity nor any sort of time associated with it. So afterwards, E goes further, ends at node 6, and at node 6 F starts, whose predecessor is E, and afterwards G and H work, and they both are having the same predecessor. Now this brings the idea of dingling nodes. Although um, G and H are starting from E, but the idea where the whole PERT chart would end is not there. So since there is no end node, so in order to finish it, we have to have actually both G and H finishing with their separate respective nodes G2. So now that is why they are connecting G with H, for the reason that we cannot leave 8th and ninth node as the dingling nodes. So that is how we will complete the PERT chart. Now, second part, a path with the longest route. It is the definition of critical path in some minds, which is actually not correct. Although the critical path is the longest path, that is true, but the thing is that it is the least time which is required to complete the project. So the right definition would be the shortest time to complete the project rather than having um, a definition that says that it is the path with the longest route or number of weeks. Now, second, A3, identify and describe a project planning technique other than PERT. There are two techniques in the syllabus. One is PERT and the other one is Gantt. Unlike PERT, Gantt is not an abbreviation, rather, Gantt is named after its inventor. So what is Gantt we will be covering in another lecture, but over here let's have the definition of it. So it is a table of squares or boxes that has time across the top and activities on the left. Boxes are colored to show dependencies and find the critical path. So critical path can also be found using Gantt chart, but that is for another lecture. So this was the question. Let's take the next question. This next question is of Winter 19 QP42. Question 1 once again. It has got another table given, and A1 also requires us to put correct activities and their durations on the PERT chart. So A starts without any predecessor, is having 1 week length, and then B starts after A, C starts after B, D starts after C, similarly E starts after C, that is quite obvious over there, and then F starts after D over here. F starts after D, and then we have got G, which is also starting after D, so that is fine. But the thing is, uh, H is having all three, E, F, and G, as their predecessors. So since E is ending at node 6, G is ending at node 8, and we want all these three to end at the same node, which is, let's say, 7. We have to make two dummy activities connecting 6 and 7 and 8 and 7, so that we could start H afterwards. So H started, uh, finished in 1 week, and then we have got I. I started after H, and J also started after H. So again, bring the idea of dingling nodes. Since if we don't connect node 10 to node 11 with dummy node, dummy activity, sorry, so we won't be able to finish our PERT. So PERT should start with one node and end at another node. So this 10th node will be connected to 11th, and logically the whole PERT chart will end at node 11. Now let's have this A2. It says that the dashed line connecting nodes 10 and 11 indicates a dummy activity. State the purpose of the dummy activity. So let's say that the next activity is dependent on the previous activity, but the previous activity is no activity. This is another definition of it. So let's solve the next question. This question is from Summer 18's QP41. Question is number 4. So it says a software company is developing a new application. The project manager has created a work breakdown structure as shown in the following table. This table is no different than any other table showing the activity, activity description, days to complete, and predecessors. So uh, activity A starts without any predecessor, and then we have got activity B, which is starting after A, but we have got activity C, D, and E, all three starting after the completion of B, as the B is their predecessor. So after completion of this, we have got activity F, which is starting after C. C is its predecessor, and then we have got G. G is starting after D and E. D is ending at node 5, but E is ending at node 9. So we have to have one dummy activity. We should connect node 9 to node 5 so that we could start G afterwards. And then G and F, they both end in node 6, where H starts. Why do they both end at the node 6? Because H is having these two F and G as its predecessors. So predecessors should be ending at the same node. So H starts afterwards, and after H we have I, which starts after uh, H, and then this way the whole PERT chart ends at node 8. Now calculate, this is part B, question 4, calculate the critical path. As I told you that one official way of completing the critical path is with all those rules, 3 rules I mentioned in my previous lecture, but that would be a lengthy practice for the exam question over here. Since this question is not that complicated, we can have this idea by having all possible paths from node 1 to 8. So be aware that sometimes this practice might become a time killing practice, and with the exam's perspective it's not a good idea. So practice it well if you want to go this way, otherwise adopt that other way which I mentioned in my previous lecture. Now what you have to do is to do either of two things. One is this, that you find all possible paths from first node to the last, or the first activity to the last, or just go on calculate it in your mind so that you find the route from first node to the last which is having longest duration. Now I calculated all possible 3 paths, and I found out that the route that has node 1, 2, 3, 9, 5, 6, 7 and 8 is having 30 days duration, which is the longest of all 3 possible paths. Second thing, sometimes you may think that the critical path may show nodes rather than activities, and other times you may see in answers that critical paths show the activities themselves. So it is a good idea in exam you may put both the activities on the critical path as well as the nodes on the critical path. So activities that form the critical path are A, B, E, G, H and I, and duration of the critical path is 30 days. For activity F, activity F is not on the critical path, so there is possibility that it might float. So what is the earliest time? If you could see activity A there are 6 days, then activity B there are 8 days, and then at activity C there are 4 days. So 8 and 4 12, and 6 it is 13 14 15 16 17 18. 18 is the latest finish time of activity C. So as per CIE, they say that if activity C would end at day 18th, next day means 18 plus 1, activity F will start. So earliest start time for activity E will be 19. Similarly, latest finish time for activity F would be 22. Uh, as the critical path is A, B, E, G. So until A, B, E, G, the earliest finish time would be 22, and that would become the latest finish time for activity F. Now, next question. A program evaluation and review technique chart has been constructed for a project that is at the planning stage. Now, this question from Winter 18 QP42, question number 5, it is also having Gantt chart in it. So, as I said that we will cover Gantt chart in another lecture. So I just picked up this question so that you could relate a PERT with the Gantt chart. So to have an idea what's the difference between the two, and later when we will work out Gantt chart, you would have a fair idea about it. So in this question, the PERT chart is given and it is already sorted out. They asked us to uh, complete the Gantt chart using the information in the PERT chart. So as I said that Gantt chart is a table of boxes where activities are listed in the left column and the durations across. So as per the PERT chart, we can see that A is actually uh, having 2 weeks to finish. So over here you can see that since one box um, denotes 1 week, we have covered 2 boxes. Similarly, B is starting after A, so B is starting after A and also taking 2 weeks. And then we have C, D, and E. They all are starting C here, D here, and E here once the B is actually completed. C is having 4 weeks, so 1, 2, 3, 4. D is having 5 weeks, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And E is having 6 weeks, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, afterwards, F is starting once C is finished. So F over here is starting once the C is finished, and similarly D is starting after, sorry, G is starting after D, and H is starting after E, and similarly this Gantt chart grows activity by activity, and I calculated the critical path which is 21 weeks, and this Gantt chart also shows the critical um, timeline of the whole project, that it will be ended on 21st week. Now second part asks, there are 3 teams working on the project. Each team is able to work on any of the activities. Explain with reference to the PERT chart how work can be allotted to the 3 teams. So here we can see um, over here that all 3 teams can work for the same task, and here as well. But when it comes to task C, D, and E, teams can be divided. Means there are 3 teams, so each team will take uh, team 1 will take task C, team 2 will take task D, and team 3 will take task E. So when there are less than 3 tasks, teams can be divided among 2 or 1 task, and when there are 3, these teams can work on separate tasks. The PERT chart is used to calculate the critical path for the project. Part C lists the activities that form the critical path using the given PERT chart on page 12. I have already calculated it. There are 3 possible paths, out of which the one A, B, E, uh, H, J, and K is the longest one, that is having 21 um, weeks duration. This is our critical path. I explain the importance of the critical path for project delivery. So critical path gives earliest finish time, that helps to organize resources efficiently. This is first thing. Second one is, if any of the task on critical path is delayed, then overall project is delayed. So we cannot afford in many cases to change the time on the critical path. This is the least time required to finish the project as well as the most. On non-critical path, there are slack and activities on non-critical path can be delayed. So by delaying activities on non-critical path, we can allocate the resources for the completion of the paths over for the completion of activities over the critical path. Let's solve next question. This is winter 17 QP42 question 2. A very simple question. A project manager is planning to create a new computer game. The following table shows the activities and estimate number of weeks to complete each activity. So we can see things over here, and when you will solve this question, this would not be a tough one. Uh, there are two dummy activities that can be seen over here, and would not um, affect the flow of the PERT over here. So activity A has no precedence, so no predecessor. In the absence of predecessor, activity starts always from the first node, and then B is dependent over A. So these predecessors are also called dependencies. So this PERT chart also shows dependencies. And then this way we go further and we will fill it out. You can see that activity E is dependent over C and D, and similarly activity I is dependent on G and I over here, G and H, sorry. Now state what the dashed line in the PERT chart represents. It's a dummy activity. You don't have to say anything other than that. You don't describe when they ask such questions for 1 mark. If there are 2 marks, then we will be actually worrying about the definition. Now, winter 15, QP41 question 1. A large software house has been asked to supply a computer solution for a business. The project manager has drawn up a list of activities and their likely durations. So I tried to find predecessors myself and I put them over there. So A will be from node 1 to 2, and then B will be dependent over A, so it will be on node 2 to 3, and then we have got C, it will be on node 3 to 4 after B over here, and then we have got D, which is on 3 to 5 after B again, and then uh, E is actually having precedence of C and D. That is why we use dummy activity after C. And then, hold on. And then we have got E and J, they both are dependent over C and D, over here and over here. And then we have got G and H, they both are dependent over F over here. Um, and then we have got L, which is dependent over J, G, and K over here. Now they ask us to complete the PERT chart that we have just completed and then state the critical path. So when we go from A to B, there is no need to worry about this is 5, and then C is higher than D in number of days, weeks completion, so this is on our critical path. Then we reach to node 5. Node 5, we cannot take J as J is 10, but if we go from this side, E is 5, and then F is 3, and then H is 5, and K is 4. So this is more than 6, 7, 8. So we will take 6, 7, 9, and then we will reach 8, and afterwards we go this way. So this would be our critical path having most number of weeks on it. So this is the least time that we need to complete, which is A, B, C, E, F, H, K, and L, and nodes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 8, and 10. So this represents 43 weeks. Now, activity J, how many weeks do we need to start activity J, which is the earliest start time of activity J? So activity J is starting here. Now 5 plus 5 plus 15, we count the time on the critical path, that is 5 plus 5 10 plus 15 25. So the earliest start time for J is 25 weeks. Now state the latest start time. Now the thing is, the J is not on the critical path, so it means it can float. Critical path is this 5 plus 3 8 plus 5 plus 4. So actually it is about 5 and 5 10 and 4 14 and 3 17 weeks. For the same from node 5 to 8 on the critical path, it is 17 weeks, whereas the J from 5 to 8 just required 10 weeks. So we can float J by 7 days. So critical path from node 5 to 8 is having 17 weeks, whereas J is having 10 weeks to complete. So we can delay J by 7 weeks. So 25 plus 7, it becomes 32. So the start of the J, uh, the latest start time could be delayed up to 32nd week. Now, part C, give a reason why the project manager used a PERT chart. As I said earlier, to show dependencies, the predecessors, to see activities that can be performed in parallel on non-critical path, and for they can observe the allocation of resources, as well as to note, observe, record changes in the project time. So that's it for all of the questions that appeared in exams since the inception of Computer Science 9608. I hope that these two lectures would have made everything clear for you. So, if there are any questions, do ask in your groups or in comments below. All the slides for these lectures are also uploaded, and their link is given in um, description below. Uh, Now, thank you very much, and I see you with my next lecture. Take care.